I mean, the Americans also did a lot of bombing the other day of ISIS. I mean, just as the Israelis did a lot of bombing of chemical weapons and so on. So there's a lot of anxiety. Anwar Gargash spoke about it in this gentle way, but the possibility of a fragmented Syria where Turkey has a lot of influence, not in in its light political Islam. I mean, Turkey isn't the UAE. I mean, Turkey has a different notion. Turkey isn't Egypt, right? So I'm curious, before we get back to Israel-Palestine, what you both think about the role of Turkey, and is it containable, is it helpful, or does it create other problems for Arab nations, other Arab nations?
I personally don't support any material engagement from one state versus another across borders. And I mean in the negative sense, not in terms of support. And that applies, of course, to Turkey. It applies to the bombings that occurred on the Syrian territories and so on. But that being said, they will pursue their interest. And they will do that in a multifaceted way, some with which we'll agree, some with which we'll differ. My approach, and my suggestions even to my own colleagues, complain all you want. That's part of the game. But you have to be proactive to balance the playing field. And to Itamar's point, if you leave the playing field open, others will fill it. So my point to my Arab colleagues, including my own country, be out there in the playing field. Make your suggestions, engage the Turks, engage the Syrians, engage whoever's on the ground, because otherwise it will be a result of an interim balance of force. And the real concern now, and this is always on the mind of Egyptians, if we move away from the nation-state concept to non-state parties, it's very, very dangerous. And I don't want to take you back to Sykes-Picot, but that whole area has families and different sects across borders. And if you start pulling those strings, you never know what you're going to pull in other countries as well.
I think, let me spend a minute describing the four major camps in Middle Eastern politics. There was the Iranian resistance axis, there was the moderate Arab states, Sunni Arab states, and there was the Islamist bloc, basically supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood brand of political Islam. That's Qatar, Turkey, and Hamas. And fourth, the jihadi organizations, ISIS and so forth. So Turkey belongs to that group, and they were big supporters of Hamas, including hosting a Hamas office in Istanbul, from which some of the activities were conducted in the region. Now, Turkey, I think, has immediate interests, two major interests. Let's also remember, Turkey has in practice annexed 8% of Syria, a strip along the border. Number one, it wants to send back 3.5 million Syrian refugees. And number two, they want to decimate, if not eliminate, the Kurdish autonomy because they regard it as a danger to the Turkish state. But then they also have the interest of Iran's rival for regional hegemony. Now Iran is weakened. Turkey, in its own eyes, can play a bigger role. And therefore, it plays two games in Syria, the immediate issues and then the quest for using the Syrian arena for enhancing its own regional position.
I'm not sure Arab states will be very happy about this, though. That's part of the question, right? Because, I mean, I think you're right, Nabil, when you say that this is, in a way, it's a defeat for what we've been through, which is Iran exercising lots of regional power through non-state actors, right? I mean, and so one has the prospect, even in Lebanon as well as in Syria, of rebuilding a kind of nation state. But do you think that, not just to stick with Turkey, but I mean, it'd be interesting to see if Turkey actually gives up the land that it occupies. It's also busily trying to attack the American-backed Kurds. So it's hardly quiet.
Definitely, and it's not going to be quiet. And that's why, and I'm not making this point theoretically, when practitioners like us, for example, particularly in my case, emphasize international law, emphasize sovereignty. If we were all chummy, then borders wouldn't make a difference.
Right.
But since we're not, ultimately there has to be a controlling order here. And whether they're artificial or not artificial, they've been around for 60, 70 years, so it's important to keep and respect for the borders. The Syrian regime imploded for many different reasons, but you can't have a situation and stability where you have 4 different states with formal states, with forces on your territory, and dozens of non-state parties. So yeah, if we don't go back to state order, you'll have all of these cross-boundary issues, and it won't be easy to get the Turks or others not to get engaged. And I would argue, actually, strategically, Turkish-Arab cooperation is much more important than the Idlib issue.
Right.
And I think that the Turks would come around on this, although they are, of course, for reasons you know, hypersensitive in terms of the Kurdish issue.